Where we left off was Mr. Geddes was going to consult with his client.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Examiner, members of the Commission. I did have an opportunity to address the Chairman's question about if the $4 million was not allocated to public interest, what would staff's position be with regard to those additional funds? And I believe staff's position would be that we would propose allocating an additional $2 million to the C&I in Category 1, $1 million to the Energy Efficiency Investment Fund, which is Category 2, and $1 million to the low-income. $2 million for a total of $3 million, which is Category 3.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes.
Okay. Does any party want to introduce any other evidence, and if not, I'm going to close the evidentiary record. I have prepared an exhibit list as of today, which takes into account the exhibits that were admitted today, and I just need to go around the room and ask joint applicants if it agrees to the evidentiary record being closed. Joint applicants.
Yes, Your Honor. Tom McGonigal for the joint applicants. We do agree with closing the record.
Staff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Public advocate?
Yes, Your Honor.
Enright?
Yes.
Merrick?
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Firestone?
Yes, Your Honor.
Chesapeake?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so the evidentiary record is closed, and there is an exhibit list that's dated September 20th, 2016.
Mr. Lawrence, thank you very much for a wonderful job conducting the hearing. Many thanks to the parties and all the input you provided us. You all did an excellent job, and we appreciate it as commissioners. And what I'm proposing that we do is that we go through the items, I think, as you all anticipated, one by one, starting with the order in which you addressed the issues and discuss each individual issue amongst ourselves in public, as we ordinarily do, and then hopefully come to a consensus, or at least a majority of three with respect to each issue. And we'll start off with number one, the DENRAC Energy Efficiency Industrial Large Commercial. It's supported by staff, public advocate, DENRAC, NAREC, and I'm not sure who else. I don't think so. And opposed, obviously, by Dr. Firestone for the reasons he made in his argument earlier. Does any commissioner wish to address, discuss, and express an opinion with respect to this issue?
This one is now clarification of $10 million.
That's what Dr. Firestone has suggested. We'll, I guess, have to.
Sorry.
Staff would propose $8 million, which currently sets in Category 1 under the Illinois energy efficiency.
So that equals $10 million total, yes?
Well, I think Commissioner Gray will address that issue when we get to the issue of the $4 million.
Yeah. Right now, we're going with the
We're just
Oh, I
talking
see.
about the $8 million right now. Just
that was
one
confusing.
individual issue by one individual issue. But I do
Okay.
appreciate the fact that some of the issues are related in certain ways, so that we need to be cognizant of that. Well, frankly, I think that Dr. Firestone makes some good observations about the reason why he opposes this. But, I've been sitting in this chair for a long time, and I've seen what's happened in large industrial and commercial entities around this state, and it's been on a downward spiral for us, unfortunately. And we need to take actions that are at least helpful with respect to those entities. And so, although I understand the arguments made by Dr. Firestone, I would support the parties who have agreed to give the $8.0 million into the EEIF Plus that DENREC will then manage. And I invite my fellow commissioners to join in any disagreement, discussion, whatever you have on your minds.
I have a comment. I would agree with Chair Winslow, and additionally, a comment made by Ms. Iori earlier, and that was that the CNI customers of Delmarva are ratepayers as well. They did not share in the initial $40 million refund rebate to the residential customers, and I think that's an important point. And this is really a fraction of that going to the CNI customers.
To sort of supplement that, we try to balance things here, and to give zero to them would not be much of a balance, despite the perhaps arguably imbalance in financial situations. But in any case, that's.
And I would hope that this would add to the, keeping the jobs, the companies that we have here, rather than going out and bringing new ones in and starting all over again, that this would let people who are already with us and doing something know that we appreciate it in some little way.
Mr. Chair, I'll reluctantly agree to the parties' consensus here that we should provide some value and incentive for the industrial and large commercial. But I'm very concerned about the ability to get an accurate baseline and to track what we described as efficiency value over time. So I would really encourage DENREC to perhaps make some publicly available information about the return on this so-called investment from the Commission as a result of the merger.
Commissioner Gray, I believe that DENREC would have a public duty and obligation. This is public business, be open and transparent to anyone who wants to ask questions, make a Freedom of Information Act request. And I think that because of your good question and finally answered by Mr. Noyes, it's pretty apparent that DENREC is aware of the issue that you brought up, believes it's important, and I believe would affirm that it's a public issue and should be transparent, and that they will be accountable for their process as we're accountable for our process. So I would move that $8.0 million of the $27,132,618 be allocated to EEIF Plus.
Second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Okay, number 2 is the $4.0 million Energy Efficient Investment Fund, and there's appears to be everyone is happy with this, and actually people want to give it more money, which is I think reflects favorably upon this particular issue. Any comments by commissioners or a motion, whatever you believe is appropriate?
I move that we adopt this recommendation of $4 million to EEIF.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion proposed to allocate $4.0 million existing EEIF for Delmarva customers? Hearing no further discussion or questions, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Number 3 is $2.0 million low-income energy efficiency for Delmarva customers. It seems to be agreement between all the parties with respect to this issue. Any questions or comments, commissioners?
I move that the commission adopts the EE low income allocation of $2 million as presented by the party.
I second it.
Is there any discussion with respect to the motion to allocate $2.0 million to low-income Delmarva customers? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Next item is number 4, is 6.0 million DDO economic development. And this has been opposed, and for the reasons stated in arguments. Commissioners, any comment on this proposal?
I'd make the comment that perhaps since I think the scope of DDO's economic development responsibilities is statewide, that this should not be confined. It should be literally statewide.
I would point out that both Ms. Iori and Mr. Geddes indicate that this is in fact not limited to Delmarva customers. It is in fact the public interest, which is more broader than Delmarva. I would concur with Commissioner Gray with respect to his observation, and I would support him on that. The other issue in this particular case is the restriction for 3 years, and also the fact that it's restricted just to natural gas infrastructure and does not allow, I guess, for the existing renewable energy or energy efficiency businesses until after the last, I guess, after 3 years, or allocate, I guess, in the remaining 2 years for those purposes. And there was some discussion by Mr. Burkett, I think, on that issue, and he wants to be, I guess, his constituency added in to the natural gas infrastructure, so that if they have something that's of real value and it exceeds, I guess, the value of whatever is going on in natural gas infrastructure, that it can be considered and be competitive, hopefully, against the natural gas infrastructure. Any observations, commissioners? I mean, anybody want to consider that change or leave that? As we all know, the natural gas initiatives statewide are certainly very much of importance to us as the Public Service Commission.
My reaction.
And there's other money, obviously, for the renewables and energy efficiency. So it appears to me that this is sort of dovetailed for the natural gas issue. And maybe I'm sort of trying to micromanage it too much by trying to second guess what the parties have agreed to here. But anyway.
Mr. Chair, I would offer that I don't think the Commission should put constraints. I think that the value proposition of the applicant and the application that comes before DDO should outweigh how they make a decision to stimulate this economic development opportunity. So I don't think that it should be constrained by the Commission 3 years to natural gas.
You say that as a former economic development officer in the city of
I want it to be known there's no conflict here. Former is the word I would camp on, Mr. Chair.
And I believe that Secretary Whaley did indicate some flexibility with respect to this particular issue, and maybe more flexibility would be better than less.
You want a motion to see that, as it's written, the $6 million to the DDO economic development?
You're welcome to make whatever motion you want, and then we'll have a chance to discuss it if there's
All
a
right,
second.
let's try that one and see if it goes. As written, $6 million for DDO economic development.
Is there a second to the motion to approve the $6.0 million DDO economic development allocation as stated in the joint applicant's line on Exhibit 54?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion concerning the motion?
Point of clarification.
This motion does not intend to constrain a 3-year restriction for natural gas infrastructure, I assume.
No.
Okay.
Well, I think that we need to be clear. When I restated the motion, I indicated that the motion appeared to me to be that we would be taking this number 4 as it was written by the joint applicants and as proposed by the joint applicants and agreed to by some of the other parties opposed by Dr. Firestone. Now, that would exclude Commissioner Gray's observation about, that would restrict it to Delmarva's service territories. would not open it up for Chesapeake, would not open it up for the entire state. It would not allow energy efficiency businesses or existing renewable energy businesses to bid on that $6.00 million. So those are some of the issues that we need to resolve. If it's not part of the motion, I think we should make that clear. If it's part of the motion, we should make that clear.
Well, I will amend the motion to add to remove the restrictions on Delmarva service territories only.
And Commissioner,
You want to remove the 3 years?
3 years also can be removed.
Well, do you want to make it a 5-year?
No.
You don't want any years?
Well, my interest in this allocation, Commissioner, would be to provide, if we're giving the $6 million for economic development and job growth,
Yes.
and we clearly would like for it to be tailored toward energy-related valued business propositions, to remove the constraints and restrictions from DITO and just allocate the $6 million without the 3-year, yes, without the 3-year, without the natural gas infrastructure, and without the Delmarva territory.
Yeah, let me if I can make a comment on that. I understand, but what I think the language here says, any funds not allocated or encumbered after 3 years. So, DITO is going to get this money, and they're going to have adequate opportunity to find someone to spend this money on that will be beneficial for the public interest. But after 3 years, what happens, I guess they might want to look outside of the natural gas infrastructure starting 3 years and 1 day, so they have adequate time to get some other entity that's energy related on board and operational and spend that money before it gets sent back to the arrearage management fund. See what I'm saying? In other words, Mr. O'Brien expressed the opinion that I guess it was there were some issues about how long it takes to get a program going, a transmission line, and he was concerned about the 3 years being adequate, and so it would be maybe appropriate to think about bumping the 3 years up to some other figure. But if the gas infrastructure does not get incentivized by this extra money, and DITO wants to look somewhere else, they certainly need time at some point in time to be able to get looked at the alternatives. And maybe 1 year wouldn't be an adequate period of time to do that. So we have sort of a catch-22 there. So having said all that, which may not make a difference to anybody's thinking, I'll let the person who's making the motion put something in the motion with respect to that.
Right, let's amend the motion as stated to remove the restrictions of the Delmarva service territory and to bump up from not allocated or encumbered after 3 years to 5 years.
Which may I?
Yes.
So this then restricts these funds to be specifically used for natural gas
yes.
infrastructure, and that seems to be what's important in everybody's proposal, but it does limit what the economic development with DITO can do. Is that right?
That's
what we're
correct.
Yeah.
agreeing to.
Yeah.
We're saying that is specifically that it is going to be restricted for natural gas infrastructure, excluding other renewable energy sources, energy businesses.
But then after the 5-year period, then they would have the ability to address the other issues here, the existing renewable energy or energy efficiency businesses located or planned to be located. So they could.
I guess I heard something a little different in the earlier conversation, which was that there was less interest to make restrictions and devote these monies to the natural gas infrastructure and allowing DITO to find those business proposals that had the greatest value to growing jobs in the energy sector. So maybe I'm confused where.
I want, my motion would retain the natural gas infrastructure.
Okay, so I'm clear on the motion. Thank you.
So it will be 5 years
Yes.
and whole of Delaware, not only
Yes.
Delaware or territory.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
So I second the revised motion.
Any further discussion on the motion, which I believe is that $6.0 million be allocated to Dido Economic Development, restricted for 5 years for natural gas infrastructure investments. Then, after the 5-year period, it would then be that Dido could go to opportunities for new or existing renewable energy or energy efficiency businesses located or planning to locate in the state.
Yes.
We have just a little bit of
Yeah.
our discussion is promoting discussion, and
I think the question I'll ask my counsel on this side of the room is, after the 5 years, does it go and revert to dealing with arrearages, or does it stay with Dido and continue as a possible source of investment for other types of renewable projects that are not related to natural gas? I think, is that the issue?
Yeah, we envisioned that after 5 years, it would revert to the arrearages program, but if I'm understanding the motion, it sounds like you want to carve that out from that reversion
Yeah.
proposal with respect to the Dido allocation, so that after 5 years, it stays with Dido to do other things, if
For
that's what I'm
new or
understanding.
existing renewable energy
Yeah.
or
For Dido.
energy efficiency businesses.
Right, that's how I'm understanding the
Yeah.
discussion, but our original intention was 5 years and it reverts. But that's a separate entry here, so you just carve that out when you get to it, if that's what you want to do.
I think that's what it seems that we want to do, and then it would revert after
Yeah.
the,
5 years.
it would revert at the end, well,
Yeah. Point of clarification.
yes.
The reason we're confused is the way the motion was originally structured was, it was for the 5-year period, natural gas, no other restriction. However, under the terms of the agreement, or the terms that were put forward, we had proposed that if those monies had not been used within the 5 years, then whatever was left over would then go to, would revert to take care of whatever arrears problem existed. So at the end of 5 years, Dido no longer has the money, it comes back. So I think the clarification point is it the commission's intention to, as Ms. McGonigal stated, carve these funds out so they go to Dido, they stay in Dido, and they never come back?
Oh, I think that's a good question, and what I would suggest to Commissioner Conaway is that she maybe reconsider the 5-year term, make it 4, which would give a year remaining to the existing renewable energy or energy efficiency businesses located or planning to locate in Delaware in the state, and then it would revert at the end of the 5 years. Would that be more consistent with what the parties had talked about?
It would, point of clarification again, yes, it would allow for both opportunities, one, the natural gas, more limited opportunity for other types of investment.
Economic
And
development.
then at the end of the 5 years, it would come back. But the idea being that if Dido could not find a home, bad word, but find a place or project, I should say, that's a better word, after 5 years, that maybe it would be better to use the money in some other manner.
Well, this another way to look at it, Commissioners, is that listening to what Mr. Burkett said, is that you can make the opportunity for natural gas infrastructure investments for the renewable energy businesses that Mr. Burkett was talking about, and then let the best competitor win, whether it be one or the other, and then the money would revert, and everybody would have had a chance for the money and compete for the money. Dido would have a chance to pick a wider field of contestants, and it would revert if no one could win the prize, which is what I would favor. But I'm not making the motion. I just,
All right, let's start all over again. Let me get this. The $6 million to Dido Economic Development. Remove the Delmarva Service Territory restriction that is in here. And we'll leave the encumbered after 3 years and the remaining 2 years to economic development. We'll leave that the same. And that will allow, after 5 years, for it to revert to, where are we going? The reversion of funds for EE economic development or public interest support. Okay? So the only thing that we're changing on it is the restrictions of the Delmarva Service Territory.
Commissioner Korean, you,
I second, second time revised.
So one clarification, Commissioner. So if we remove the Delmarva territory,
Yeah.
Can we constrain and confine it to within the state of Delaware?
oh, it has to be.
I would have assumed that would have, and I'm sorry, because I know what assuming does, but I did assume that it would be within the state of Delaware.
The record should reflect that we don't intend to spend a penny out of state.
You don't want to have New Jersey or Maryland.
Any further discussion on the motion? And the party's clear on the motion for purposes of writing the order. All those in favor signify by
Wait,
saying.
you've got a question.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair, just so that we have a full understanding of this. The only thing that you're removing in this is the Delmarva Service Territory.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So let me just, another point of clarification. You're giving Dido less ability to choose other projects than they had requested in their comments. Is that correct? Under that motion?
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
It would be contrary to what argument you made, to be more specific.
Is that clear enough?
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye. Yes. Like that.
I abstain. Okay. Number 5, I believe is 4.0 to public interest. And this was one that was pretty hotly opposed by the DPA. And I found, as I usually do with Ms. Iori, her logic and reasoning was to be very good. And I also thought that, the contest here with Dr. Firestone's idea that academic institutions had considerable merit to it. I speaking for myself, I just don't like the openness of this whole $4 million. This $4 million, and I just don't feel like I got a handle on it, where it's going to go, how it's going to go, who's going to get it. There's just no substance there that I can get my hands around. So I don't think I can support that particular circumstance. Anybody else want to comment on it?
I do want to comment, and I want to say that this is the only portion of the $27 million that isn't really specifically allocated at this point, and it is open to potential public interest projects that are beneficial. And based on who wins that RFP process, or two, or how many ever, there could be some projects that aren't identified immediately that would be funded because of this $4 million in the public interest to be held, and that may be renewable energy projects, and it may be the wind and solar project at University of Delaware. It could be a number of things, but it does carve out $4 million of the funds for potential future projects that aren't immediately identified today. And
And I
I
would
think it's
agree
good
with
to
that.
have some funds available for that. Even though at this time, we're not specifically identifying exactly whether that's solar, wind, or other.
Mr. Chair, I understand the value of having the $4 million, if you will, on deposit in the bank. But I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that in two cases the party said qualifying public interest projects, but they have not come up with a definition of what qualifies. I think that the beneficiary in every case would be better being the ratepayers who have to pay for the utility services, and so perhaps we can find a better way of allocating these funds elsewhere in this exercise.
And, when I asked Mr. Geddes the question, I asked him because of that eventual outcome, and I guess one thing we could do is to set the 4.0 million aside and say to the parties, you're going to have to come back with us on this issue and convince us that you've got more specifics about how you're going to do it, more specifics about who would be eligible, clarity with respect to the issue raised by DPA about that this has already been foreordained to go to somebody that I know nothing about, and I don't know if that's correct or it's just maybe a suggestion that she's not alleging that's going to happen, but I just think there's just a degree of discomfort, and so I would suggest that we consider putting it on the back. Well, we could ask Mr. Geddes directly, I guess. I don't know if staff and other people want to put the time and energy into this, or they rather just kick the ball down the field and have us consider the allocation as suggested by Mr. Geddes and
Point of clarification, if I might, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to put the time in it, and we would like to, if it's acceptable to the members of the commission, put some more specifics on it. Understanding your concerns as discussed in deliberations and also in questions to staff and comments before. So we would like to do that.
Commissioner Gray?
Mr. Chair, I then would move that the commission stay and or suspend consideration on the public interest proposal of $4 million until such date that staff and the other parties can come back to us with more specific and definitive information.
I'll second the motion.
The only other discussion I would request that we have, and you don't have to have it, but I think that Dr. Firestone made some points with respect to solar and wind power academic research or training. Does anybody want to consider that, or do you want to just go ahead with that would be part of the motion?
I'd leave it open and see what comes of it. We could hatch
Mr.
something
Chair,
really great.
sorry, wouldn't it be reasonable to assume that Dr. Firestone could participate in those conversations in such a way as to more duly have the other parties consider his proposal?
Well, I think what will happen is the parties will, the staff is going to do the work to get this issue sort of more refined and in a better position for us to examine its viability. And then Dr. Firestone would obviously be in a position to, as a party, to be consulted with before they comes back to us. And then we, at the end of the day, can say, no, we don't want to do the public interest. We want to do what Dr. Firestone wants to do, or we want to allocate it as the state has suggested, or staff has suggested, or we might allocate ourselves in some other way. So I think by doing as you suggested initially, that we'll have total flexibility as to what we do in the future after we get more information. Is that perfectly clear to everybody?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. losing track of the numbers. That was 5.
Electrical vehicle.
Number 6 is electric vehicle charging. And we all learned something today. I didn't realize that there was $500,000 in the pot for electric vehicle recharging. And I would say that Dr. Firestone's comments on this when he made his initial presentation were sound. I mean, California itself, they couldn't get anything going in a variety of areas, and so they had to jumpstart actually hydrogen cell vehicles. They had an initiative there, and they also with the electric vehicles, they put money aside to get stations in the state. So I think you're on the right track, but it just appears that DENREC may have been ahead of you. You don't have to admit that. I'm just saying that.
I would actually like to clarify the record so that people understand the differences. DENREC is coming up with $500 to put towards, say, a homeowner or a business that wants to install an electric vehicle charger.
Gotcha.
What I wanted to do was to install chargers throughout the state. My own personal view is that we would really want to spend about $2 million doing that, but I was trying to put forward a proposal that might find more interest in this commission. So what DENREC is doing is laudable, but it's different and to me won't really solve the issue that my proposal was addressed at. Thank you.
Now, an electric vehicle charging station will charge the customers who use the electricity, correct?
It will be free.
So this is a business.
I think his proposal.
Ultimately, yes. But what I'm proposing was that we, as a state, work with businesses to deploy these chargers throughout the state, just like there's gas stations to fuel your vehicle throughout the state. That if we make it convenient for the general public to fuel their vehicle with electricity, people will buy electric vehicles. If we have the present situation, it's going to be quite limited as far as who's going to buy electric vehicles.
Of course, Delaware is small, and
Yeah.
I heard rumor that the Bolt is coming out and go 238 miles on a charge.
So you go up and down
if
the
you live in
state on the
Delaware,
charge.
maybe we don't need to put in the 500. In any case, I just don't think I have enough information on that particular issue. I'm not going to be support. I'm very much in support of electric vehicles and charging stations, but under the circumstances, I can't support this request. Anybody have a motion?
You want a motion to deny the request?
That's what my preference would be.
All right, so moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
Abstention by Commissioner Drexler. Next one is the low-income customer rebate. This is a position that Dr. Firestone felt strongly about and articulated and advocated in a strong fashion. Any comments by the commissioners?
I'll offer this comment. As I read the proposal, just at its face value, it would seem to me to be relatively complex to administer. I think it would be very difficult, subject to manipulation, and it's a good concept, but in practice, I'm just not comfortable or confident that one could actually administer it well or efficiently.
I guess the only, I would love to have $10 million to give. I think it's a great idea. But I do think that we have to have some balance, and I do think one of the state's strongest arguments is that balance argument and the allocation picture they put together, which I think that, shows pretty strongly that there's a decent balance. maybe at some point in time we'll have more money for this particular situation. We do have LIHEAP, we have SEU has a program for debt. They have money for low-income people. We have money for low-income. We've given money to low-income people. So, in any case, my thoughts.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Commission choose deny the low-income customer rebate proposal as submitted by Dr. Firestone.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to deny the low-income customer rebate? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. The arrearage management plan. This is $3.1 million, which seems to exceed the present value of the arrearages. I forget what the figure was I was provided. It was
2.1
and
and
1 point something. So
it's
it's close. It's close. We'll get extra money as time goes by, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a good way to do it. Mr. Shell, you look very eager to say something.
I guess just another point of clarification. There's also part of the arrearage management plan and the way it's going to work is it's not just going to cover money that is on the books of Delmarva as unpaid, but if somebody's been out and they come back, they may have a large balance that was written off and isn't accounted for anymore. And this would allow to pay that off so that this person can now get reconnected and come up with a plan to pay his or her utility bills on a regular basis and draw that money down. So the arrearage amount is just the amount that's still on the books, but I think this funding would go to covering those older debts that might not be showing on the books anymore.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Chairman.
I make a motion that we approve the arrearage management plan as presented and agreed by the parties.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Next one is the reversion of funds, 5 years. Then they revert to the arrearage management plan. Any comments?
Move we adopt the reversion of funds as presented.
I second it.
Any discussion on the motion to approve the reversion of funds? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes unanimously. Next one is the renewable investment. And on this particular one, I'll kick it off by indicating that it's government agencies to develop renewables, and I would like that to be renewables as we know renewables and not renewables as maybe defined by the legislature. We have some additions that I don't believe in the energy field consider to be renewables. If I have to be more specific, I would say fuel cells. But obviously, that's just my opinion. Who else? What else? Anybody else want to talk on this?
There may still remain an open question whether we can employ a definition of renewables as we know them or whether we have to follow the definition as provided by the legislature. But I would agree with you that renewables should be those which I scientifically have come to understand mean renewables.
I think if you explain in whatever motion you make what you mean by renewables, then you would not be limited to what the legislature says, as long as you explain what you mean.
So, Mr. Chair, I make the motion that the Commission adopt the renewable investment proposal of $3 million as agreed by the parties, which would be capital for government agencies to develop renewables. that are scientifically, by nature, able to be grown, retrieved, and put back into service, or otherwise generated by technology techniques producing fuel. Natural techniques producing fuel.
But not fueled by,
Yeah,
not fueled by things like oil or gas or
fuel by injection.
nuclear or.
Correct. Standard, not fueled by standard means today of energy generation.
All right, I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Microgrid. The suggestion by the parties that we defer consideration.
5 megawatt commercial renewable energy generation.
As I said, yes, thank you. Thank you. It must be after 5.
Yeah.
5 megawatt commercial renewable energy generation. Any comments? Any motion?
Motion to approve the 5 megawatt commercial renewable energy generation proposal as presented.
Second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes unanimously. As I said, microgrid.
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission defer consideration until further progress is made in Maryland and D.C. related to microgrid.
I second it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Miscellaneous wording changes.
Mr. Chair, as this relates, the extent to which this relates to the amended settlement agreement, which now is revised amended settlement agreement, I don't think that the Commission has gone through some of these changes since the day we approved the merger, and there are some discussions and questions that I may have related to those changes. But otherwise, I think that the public advocate may have touched on something related to ring fencing, for an example, that I may have some concerns about. So, as this is adopted, I want to make sure that we're not saying that that language presented to us today is fixed and finished.
Well, the only thing I would suggest to you, I believe that when the joint applicants filed one of their documents, that the ring fencing language, et cetera, was already in there. It was the typical ring fencing language we had with PHI when. So I don't know that specifically is what Commissioner Gray's problem is. The general problem seems to be that we don't know exactly what the language is, right?
Well, I've seen the changes that are proposed. I just want to make sure that by adopting a vote to adopt this means that I agree in each case and have questions answered that may come before those changes.
Mr. McGonigal. Mr. Schell.
Mr. Chairman, as I said before, perhaps the appropriate way to handle this is during your next meeting, we'll have the full text of the order and we'll provide it to you in advance of the meeting. If there are any questions that any commissioner has about where the language came from or what it does, we can be available to answer any questions the commission might have.
Satisfactory to me, Mr. Chair.
Very well said. And we're now, I guess, in a position where we're going to be, I guess we don't have to vote on this one then, right?
We do.
Because we'll just wait.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a minute order today. When we're going to do the minute, no, couldn't possibly do it today. Connie's going, Okay. So I just want you all to know that I'm going to go to Russia, so I'll be in Russia. Whoever wants to hand carry the document to me, I'll be happy to sign it.
They have email there.
That's true. That's true.
And DocuSign?
So we're going to get a.
S//
So there's going to be, let me see, there's going to be a minute order or a full order. one or the other on October the 6th.
Negative on the full order.
The minute order of October the 6th.
It's going, Mr. Chairman, it's going to be a partial order, and basically the form of it is attached to our submission of September 12th as Exhibit B, and it will be a partial order, and at our next meeting, I'll be available, or Mr. McGonigal will be available to answer any questions that anyone has.
A question on procedure, Mr. Chair. So does that mean that we perhaps should take an order to suspend this item until our next meeting where this topic is on our agenda?
Yes, if you were to formalize that, certainly.
All right. Mr. Chair, I move that the Commission suspend deliberation on the miscellaneous wording changes proposed by the parties until such time as this topic comes before the Commission on a regular agenda.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes unanimously. Is there, Mr. Howard, given the time of the day, you're welcome to say whatever you'd like to say. I suggest,
No,
I suggest
Can we take a vote?
goodbye. Goodbye, my dear.
I'm lacking a microphone because our sound system is a little short. I texted the public advocate during the meeting, but he's obviously not got the right phone over there. I suggested there's an additional $32,000 left in the fund that we could perhaps use for a new sound system here at the Public Service Commission. So I'll just let that hang out there for what it's worth.
You mean we didn't get rid of the 132,618?
No, you got rid of the 100. You didn't get rid of the 32,618.
Really?
Wow.
Never tell us that.
The only thing I have on my notes here is that we have a commission meeting on Thursday, October the 6th, starting at 1 o'clock, and I believe Chairman Winslow will be speaking Russian that day.
Yep.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Thank you.
Thank you all.